Welcome to Quartal Podcast, which is in English, ageless. And our main focus is on longevity. So I think I have a pretty good candidate for to talk about these things. The writer of this book, which was released last year and already have the peak 40. So my guest is Dr. Marc Bubbs. Hi.
Peter, appreciate you taking the time.
Thank you for actually accepting the acceptance or the invitation because I rarely I have chance to talk to very high level longevity experts, sports experts, but you're definitely one of those I was really looking forward to meet online.
Yeah, likewise. I know you're doing some great work in Hungary, and yeah, look forward to diving into today's conversation around longevity.
Thank you. And as I understand your background, you are an MD, right?
Yeah, so I trained as a naturopathic doctor as well as a clinical nutritionist and performance nutritionist. So my work is mainly nutrition's the focus,
Mhm.
movement as well, but having that clinical understanding of how to assess um, clients or patients really helps to provide a framework from which to support health and help people achieve their goals, whether they're playing professional sport or the Olympics, or whether it's the rest of us trying to perform in our busy lives with work and kids and all the rest of it.
So you wrote and published a book called Peaks. So I have this with me,
Hmm.
and but then you published Peak 40. So why was the need or urge to create a second book? Because the first book is actually an amazing book. So when the publisher told me you come up with the next one, like really interesting. I wonder what he's gonna cover.
Yeah, the main book is Peak. That's the deep dive into human performance. And if you like to listen to books, it's about a 13-hour listen on Audible. So it's certainly no shortage of content there. And then Peak 40 is really a side project because I was approached by a lot of coaches on the coaching staffs of professional teams, clients who say, well, look, Peak's great. I love all the science, but I need a straightforward roadmap. I need a system to be able to help me where
Mhm.
I'm at, right? So
Mhm.
Peak 40 is more of that book, the actionable book. If you're a busy individual, you don't have to be in your 40s, 50s, and beyond, but typically that's when life gets the busiest, right? All of a sudden, we don't have time to be necessarily meal prepping or counting our macros. We don't have time to go to the gym 6 times a week like we did in our 20s. There are things that are, more important, whether it's work, whether it's family, whether it's both. And so, how do we build a system that can help us to fuel our best, to move our best, and to, again, feel and perform your best, even though you only have half an hour twice a week to work out or move, even though it's difficult, you're up early and you're home late from work, right? These are the common challenges that people have. And sometimes when we lay out these really long-winded, or really detailed granular programs, it's difficult for people to even get started because it's too much at once. And so for me, how I practice, even with athletes, we're always trying to layer things on, bit by bit. And that has been a challenge, although since Atomic Habits came out, everybody now seems to buy in. So I have to give a hat tip there because now people understand the value of layering things on, which is great.
Mhm. You are you are actually working with clients and patients for over 20 years or 20 plus years, right?
Yeah,
Yeah.
yep.
So if I'm going to my time machine, or 20 years ago, 30 years ago, it was training and mainly diet. And that was it, by the way, right? So now you
I
talk
mean,
about
du-
microbiome, you talk about sleep, you talk about recovery, you talk. So is there anything that, let's say in the last 5 years, you were like, that's something new to me as well, or I have to change my opinion on something that I was really sure about.
it's a really interesting time because for the last 25 years of doing this, getting people the information has been the big thing. So even when I wrote Peak, which now is 2016, 2017, 2018, right? Um, there weren't nearly as many podcasts. There weren't nearly as many really reputable people delivering podcasts. So it was still challenging to find the information that people wanted. And it's amazing the change over the since 2019 when it came out to now in 6 years, information's everywhere. And we still have this, and clients and athletes still have this desire to find out the new thing, the shiny new toy, so to
Mhm.
speak. But as you'll see in the book, I mean, Peak is now 2019, 6 years old. The fundamentals, 90 to 95% of everything in there still applies to a
Mhm.
T, right? And so now we're in an era, especially with AI, where access to information isn't the problem anymore, right? Now
Mhm.
people almost have too much information, right? They're trying this diet and that diet, and they
Mhm.
heard something great over here, so they're doing this. And so we end up with this really scattered approach, um, almost like taking spices out of the spice rack and just throwing things in because you heard they're good, but they don't actually match up at all, right? Um, and so people need help curating a path, right? Um, and that's where, as a coach, it helps. This is where we come in to help people and athletes to lay down some of those key fundamentals. I often talk about, I used to play a lot of golf. Even if you're not a golfer, in the game of golf, you could go to a driving range, and before anybody even hits the ball, just the way they're standing, the way they're holding it, and the way they're aligned, you already know if they're a good golfer or not. And the likelihood of success, the likelihood of them hitting a good shot is so low because they have not set themselves up for success, right?
Mhm.
Everything's wrong before they even start. And so part of this whole story is helping people to get those fundamentals, the stance, the grip, the alignment. Now they're in the best position to succeed. And the most likely outcome is a good or pretty good shot versus, again, if you're a golfer, most people hit a 30-yard slice into the woods. So it's not easy. Um, so this is where, yeah, today it's all about, there's so much information out there, which is tremendous. But I would say to people, lack of information is no longer the problem. We need to start fitting the information to the individual. And it's almost like a little test. Before we add bells and whistles, we need to come back to revisit the fundamentals. People say, I can't lose weight. Okay, let's just talk a bit of conditioning. How long would it take you to run a mile? And they say, geez, well, about 15 minutes. Okay, well, we've got something to work with here, right? This is something we can improve. Aerobic conditioning, you talked about the gut. One of the things that's completely overlooked, and almost 20 years ago when I worked in a clinic in Toronto, it's one of the side effects we found was people were doing these elaborate gut protocols, but we also had them training in the gym. And those of us who were improving their conditioning, their gut microbiota, the balance of gut bacteria got a lot better. So
Mhm.
we know that aerobic conditioning, great for losing weight, great for blood sugar control, great for longevity, right? Also great for the microbiome, for the immune function. And so all these intersecting loops with one strategy, we can start to see improvements in all these
Mhm.
areas. And
Mhm.
so I think helping to hold clients accountable and helping to lay out the picture of like, okay, you're not too fit. That's okay. We don't need to necessarily, I work with some of the best long distance runners in the world and some of the best sprinters. We don't need to train 6 times a week, twice a day. We can do a lot with 10, 15, 20 minutes, 2, 3 times a week, right? Let's build ourselves up. And so I think when you ask about kind of what's new, I think curating the path for people and helping to coach them up so that they can almost like a racehorse, the blinders that the racehorses wear, they
Mhm.
don't see out, they just see what's in front of them. That's what we need to help people with these days because it's just so easy now to kind of go, well, what's that over there? And get distracted and pulled down into an area that's not going to give people a lot of results and it takes up a lot of their mental and physical energy.
Mhm. So there's another thing which are brought up a lot, and also in your book, both of them, which is circadian rhythm.
Hmm.
And and now people are throwing around these terms like circadian rhythm, microbiome, like like these are very important terms, but how circadian rhythm affects health, performance, but also let's say body composition. So could we go through mainly all the three areas? And if there is more, even better.
Yeah, I think the easiest way for the general person to understand this is the more variable when you wake up is in the morning, right? The more it changes from 6 a.m., 8 a.m., 7 a.m., 10 a.m., the more variable the morning is. And of course, the more variable the evening is, the more the the less well you're going to recover, right? So your total sleep time will likely go down, your sleep quality will likely go down. And what you're referring to here are circadian rhythms or natural daily rhythms, right? That help us to have energy when we wake up and that helps us to feel like we are getting tired and settling down nicely. The nervous system's relaxing in preparation for bed. These things get thrown out of balance as well. And so this is where, I'm working with people like Dr. Sherry Ma, sleep expert, Stanford, did all her work at Stanford as a sleep scientist and now a medical doctor. Her original work was one of the first in pro sports showing these performance benefits from extending sleep. So going from an athlete, a collegiate athlete might only get 6.5 hours, right? You're in college, you're in university, you stay up too late, you drink too much, etc. They got them to sleep, add an extra hour to an hour and a half. And then all of a sudden we started seeing these performance benefits, or Dr. Ma started seeing performance benefits. And this kicked off a whole area of research in sleep and performance. And so for the person at home, it becomes this question of, can we anchor our wake time? Can we wake up at a consistent time every day? Right? That's the first step, because that's going to help you, even if initially, right, if you're not, let's say, an early riser and you sleep in a little later, yeah, the first week or two, you're going to feel a little bit more tired when you wake up, but eventually you should rise without too much trouble, right? You should be able to get up with your alarm. But the one that ends up becoming more of the problem for us these days is the end of the day. Because, hey, social media and the internet's amazing. We can connect for podcasts like this, thousands of kilometers apart. But now we stay up too late, right? And again, these loops that intersect, the later you stay up, the more likely you are to be on a screen, right? And so being on a screen this far away, the blue light is going to interfere with your ability to fall asleep, right? Melatonin is your sleep hormone. It's like the starter's pistol for sleep if you're thinking track and field. And that's going to get suppressed. So you're not going to sleep as deeply. The later you stay up, the more likely you are to eat in the evening, right? This is called late eating. And now almost 2/3 of all the calories we consume come after 6 o'clock, which isn't really ideal, right? If we're up and moving around all day long, we don't really want to back end all of our calories. Less important if you're an athlete really with high outputs, and more adversely impactful if you're sedentary, right? And the later you stay up, the more likely you are to have processed food, sugary foods, alcohol. So this is not good, right? And so setting a bedtime, and it always sounds funny when you're working with executive clients or a professional athlete, and you're sort of like your parent or your grandparent telling a child, okay, well, we need to go to bed at this time, right? And again, it's super simple. And these days, like when I wrote Peak, that wasn't nearly as well known. And there was a graphic in the book that got passed a lot around in pro sport, kind of highlighting some of the areas. But now people know about it. But knowing is not enough, right? It's the doing. We need to apply the knowledge. And so really helping people, because they'll tell you, oh, I know sleep's important. I know I shouldn't be on my phone. And then you say, well, what do you do in bed? I scroll on my phone, right? And so we need to help them build some systems so that is not the automatic reaction. And for all of us, we're all going to get pulled downstream, right? It's just the environment that we're in. But if we can start keeping our phone in a different room, if we can start a half an hour before bed, turning the lights down, maybe reading a book, getting off the computers and the phones, these things have a really tremendous impact because, again, if we talk all these connections, if you have a short sleep, so let's say you only get 5 hours of sleep, the following morning, your blood sugar response to your breakfast, even a healthy breakfast, will be exaggerated, will be higher than normal, just based on the fact that the body's under the stress of lack of sleep, right? People, when they're tired, tend to go to coffee. I'm a huge coffee fan, but if you're really tired, coffee first thing in the morning, we also see it that exacerbates that blood sugar response, right? So you kind of want to wait till you do eat to have that coffee, even though, again, the natural reaction is, man, I'm tired. Okay, coffee, right? So when working with athletes and clients, these aren't easy things to fix. So we have to have a roadmap of what we can do in the short term and the medium term, but we also need to let them know, like, this is a great way for you to then sleep better. So you're going to feel more energized for the day. Your cravings the next day will start to go down. If you're someone who's holding on to too much weight, you'll start to lose weight, especially visceral adiposity, so body weight around the midsection. So inflammation levels will start to come down. If you have high blood pressure, that's a nice win for that as well. So, there are some profound impacts from some simple strategies,
Mhm.
which is nice if you can keep the strategy simple. But underneath that simple strategy, there's a lot of complexity in terms of how it affects the system, right? The individual. But our clients don't necessarily need to know all the physiology behind it unless they're keen. But yes, anchoring the wake time and getting to bed you know at a consistent evening time is just a huge win to set you up again for success, the next day and the next month, etc.
Regarding to the circadian rhythm, do you see, because like from Dr. Volker, we hear about like somebody's an early riser, like owl, like early birds. Do you see these chronotypes, or you see these chronotypes more like it's a broken chronotype? Because most likely most people should be around about the same pattern, but with time and age, and especially with the environment, it keeps changing a lot. And then we just name them owl.
Yeah, I think that the society puts us in a position where the morning lark, the early riser is sort of the normal, right? Like we get up earlier, we get to work, we take the kids to school, et cetera, et cetera. So the people who tend to struggle are the night owls. And this is called social jet lag. It
Mhm.
means that your chronotype, even though you like to sleep in and you like to stay up later, doesn't match the typical society, which says you got to get up at a certain time, get to work 9 to 5 job type of thing. So those are typically going to be the people who struggle the most, right? Is the night owl. Now, with Zoom working, remote working, and different things, people can offset that. I'll tell you a good one. Athletes are the reverse, right? They might be lucky to be a night owl because they're like shift workers, right? They work at night from 7 p.m. The game ends at 10:30 in North American sports, but they're amped up. They've got to decompress. There's treatments, there's lifting. So they don't really have dinner until 11:30. They might go to bed at 1 or 2. It sounds late, but then they're sleeping, right? Their whole schedule is delayed. So it really depends on the individual. Certainly, if you do shift work, regular shift work like a police officer, a fireman, that's challenging, right? When you're working multiple, through the night for a certain week and then into the morning, that's a stress on the body. And I think that's where using things in the morning, like consuming a meal, caffeine, exposure to light, some light movement, these are good ways of at least helping the body reset itself to the proper time and then reset those circadian rhythms.
Is there any supplements you use with your clients or your athletes which might help? Because there's one thing that how many hours to sleep, but also that would be nice to spend some time in the on the entry and the REM phase, right? So like the deep sleep stages. And many times we see that even people are spending, let's say, enough time in the bed, which doesn't mean they sleep, but they complain about how tired they wake up, and there might be an issue with the deep sleep stages. What do you think about that?
Yes, deep sleep's a tricky one because even with the best wearables, we still don't they still don't measure deep sleep well, right?
Mhm.
Compared to being in a laboratory setting. So total sleep time is still the quote unquote best thing a typical person could measure to see how they're doing. I would say at the outset, if there's somebody who hasn't been sleeping a lot and they start to sleep more, they might wake up more fatigued, more tired. If there's somebody who, as you suggest, we know they're now getting 7.5 or 8 hours of sleep, and we say, hey, you should be feeling better, and they're not
Mhm.
feeling better. This is where, as a coach, you would go back to that hour, 2 hours before bed and start asking questions around what they're doing in that period, because more than likely, screen time, the type of content they're consuming, all these things that will be engaging the nervous system. And with regards to supplements, there may be a place there that would be more acute whilst we're trying to unpack what's going on with the lifestyle. One of the best things is to just take a hot bath. Like if you have access to, you know, a jacuzzi or just a hot bath, once you come out of that hot bath, there's rapid cooling that happens and that kicks up melatonin output to be able to set you up for sleep. Also, when people are in the bath, they tend not to be on their phone, right? So you're getting a double win of like now you get the technology away. Maybe you put some relaxing music on. So setting up a rhythm that people get into just it naturally, right? Like when you go and sit in your car, you don't even think twice about it, but you reach over and you put your seatbelt on, right?
Mhm.
It does not take any thinking from the cortex, the outer part of your brain, right?
Mhm.
Because you've repeated that so many times. And then that environment of being in the car, literally the subconscious brain just does this, the response. And so a lot of what we're trying to do with clients and athletes is create a similar thing where that nighttime routine, which at first might feel like another item on your to-do list, if you repeat it enough, all of a sudden it just becomes what you do. It doesn't feel like an extra task. You're getting the benefits from it. But that can take some time. And so, yeah, in the meantime, you know, melatonin can be helpful for certain individuals.
Mhm.
L-theanine can be helpful for certain individuals. Glycine. But I've used these things for over 20 years, and none of them is a long-term solution, right? These are all short-term supports, maybe during a busy period or for an athlete, a compressed schedule where there's a lot of outputs. But at the end of the day, there's just nothing that beats getting your routine right to really get the length and the quality of sleep.
Is there any tricks to beat like jet lag or just maybe not even jet lag, but like athletes are moving around a lot from hotel to hotel, and most of them are complaining about bad sleep and which even affecting their performance. So is there anything that you do with them to ease this kind of anxiety or anything?
Yeah, I mean, I'm based now in the UK and I fly back and forth to the US very regularly for work and consulting. So certainly the jet lag side of things is a big one for me. Anytime that you're going west, it's going to be easier to acclimatize. So, you're sort of starting your day. So you're staying up a bit later in the evening, so you fall asleep well. You get up in the morning, which is quite easy because even at four, naturally I would wake up, say 4 a.m. in the Eastern time zone because that's 9 a.m.,
Mhm.
UK time. If you're going west, then all of a sudden, the mid-afternoon, if you can get a nap in, because around 1 or 2 o'clock, you're going to start to get quite tired because now it's getting towards the evening in your natural time. So taking a nap there is great, and then a bit of physical activity, and that can help push you through if you're going east to west. West to east is difficult, right? So when you come back across, if I come back from the east to the US to UK or Europe, right? That's typical because you have a very short sleep, and now all of a sudden, it's time to start the day at 7 or 8 in the morning, but in your body now it's 2 or 3 in the morning, right? So those are again trickier. If it's just an acute strategy for the individual, it's tough to build something in because oftentimes when people are first exposed to it, it really impacts them, right? Um, I think for athletes and players, it's finding the thing that works best for that person. Some people like to keep it quite kind of natural and just do one or two small things. Other people, and this is based more on personality type, like to do 4 or 5 or 6 things. It makes them feel like they have more control over the situation. So the interesting thing with the whole science is that the person's disposition kind of dictates how you're gonna, for some athletes, if I told them to get outside, have a coffee, go for a run, et cetera, that would stress them out and it would cause more problems than it would solve, right? Um, and yeah, for the athletes, I mean, going from hotel to hotel is when you're in a new environment, you tend to sleep a little bit worse if you're in a new bed for the first time. And they're also in North American sport, often going from a bus to a practice facility inside like a professional basketball player. So they don't get exposed to the outdoor light. So that's a really big one if you're going from place to place. It's just in the morning getting outside, whether it's even on your balcony in your room, just get some of that morning light, get the Nespresso machine or get the coffee going there, sit outside, get a bit of air. If you can do even go for a walk around the block or a couple of blocks to get some movement. That's a really nice, gentle way to help adapt. And then that notion of just having a nap. If you're not a napper, you just put some music on 20, 30 minutes,
Mhm.
close your eyes. It's okay if you don't fall asleep. You likely won't, but that's still going to help to recharge, the alpha brainwave activity, settle that stressful beta brainwave activity and push you through. And after that, the more you do it, the more you sort of get used to it.
Mhm. Thank you. So let's move to longevity a little bit.
Yeah.
So we go more for the peak 40 direction. So I see some kind of, I would say, renaissance for muscle development. Let's say that. So strength. I mean, science says like resistance training, but it's mainly strength training. So, do you see that? And if yes, what would be one of the best way or approach to start for somebody who just got the memo and heard about, well, it seems like muscle is not anymore for the beach or for just pumping irons, but more like about your years to come.
Yeah, it's an interesting one because whenever, years ago when you're in medical school, they would say, well, that person has a low resting heart rate, but they're an athlete, so that's different than the rest of the population. It's okay if they have a high resting heart rate. And you think to yourself, well, shouldn't we all just be fit enough to have generally a lower resting heart rate, right? And so you can appreciate that how in a medical environment you need to have obviously certain standards when you're diagnosing disease, but the idea that 80 to 100 is a normal resting heart rate, I mean, that just lets you know that the person is not well conditioned. If we take that a step further to what you're talking about, which is muscle, yeah, like for the last 20, 25 years, those of us in the industry have known that muscle's great for longevity, but the silos kind of separated bodybuilding from even sport training from medical, right? They were all disconnected. And so it's amazing now with the connectivity and everybody talking to each other that the the research has exploded, medical doctors have gotten on board, and we know that muscle plays an active role in supporting a number of very impactful physiological functions, right? I mean, muscle's like a sink for glucose, right? It's like a sponge. So you can consume more total fuel or even more sugars without the same response as if you're unfit, right? It's obviously key as you get older because we don't think about explosiveness when we're in our 70s maybe or 80s, but the fast twitch muscle fibers is what helps to prevent you from falling over, right? It's what helps you to catch your step so you don't fall down. And anybody who has a parent or grandparent who's had a fall, even in their 60s or 70s, if you break your hip, all of a sudden, a lot of other things can go wrong very quickly, right? We can't exercise, we're losing muscle mass, might be more likely to catch, viral infections, which for some individuals, a bad cold in your 70s or 80s that can also knock you out for a good 2 to 4 weeks. And so, yeah, muscle's massive when it comes to not just body composition and how you look, but in terms of longevity and physical function, right? Like we used to think that you couldn't build muscle in your 70s or 80s. Now we know you can. And if you've ever seen, there's something called the Penn State Relays, which is a famous track and field event, and they have masters and super seniors categories, and you go check that out on. I'll send you the links there on Instagram or YouTube. You got 82-year-olds running 100 meters in 17 seconds, right? Like they could beat 4 out of 5 people walking on the street, and they're 80 years old. And so and this kind of shows you the limiting factors often between the years, right? Of, well, I'm 60 years old, I'm 50 years old, I can't play golf like I used to, or I can't. Well, certainly we have to be a little bit realistic in that we don't recover in the same way, right? We probably need a bit longer warm up to get the blood flowing. We need to think a bit more about mobility, right? So that we're able to perform some of the movements that we're after. Have to maybe be a little bit smarter about like how much we're deadlifting or back squatting or some of these bilateral movements. We need to, make sure that those are happening in a way that's comfortable and safe for the person in front of them. And we're not just, the old mantra was like bigger, faster, stronger, right?
Mhm.
Which is sort of okay, but then if it's bigger, faster, stronger, more injured, and you're not on the field, then you're not really helping anybody out. And so a saying in sport is the best ability is availability,
Mhm.
right? Like you have to be available to play, i.e., not injured, in order to make progress. And so for the rest of us in this sort of peak 40 longevity conversation, is the biggest limiting factor is the person getting injured because consistency is the best predictor of getting fitter and getting stronger. So the the worst type of clients, well, I'll say worst, I mean, the most challenging are people who used to be fit because when they start back up, they want to go right back to how much they used to deadlift or how much they used to press. And when you go from low activity to high activity, that's a real risk factor for injury, right?
Mhm.
Ironically, the client who hasn't maybe exercised much in their life, who are quite nervous about, like, I'm in my 40s, I'm in my 50s, I've really never strength trained, I've never exercised, I'm worried here. they're the best clients because they listen and you can program nice and slow and progress things. And they've got, there's not a lot of load they've had on their joints from various sports. And so they can make beautiful progressions over time. And I think this is where people, and you can see it like the aha moment when they realize, I actually don't need to do that much to get stronger. I don't need that many days of conditioning to get fitter. I don't need to change my diet that much. And all of a sudden, I'm losing 20, 30, 40 pounds. My blood sugars have gone from, you know, 6.6, 7 pre-diabetic to 4.6. My inflammation, CRP levels from 3, 4, all the way down under 1. Things like triglycerides, and we talk about metabolic health, up in the, if we use American units, up in the well past the hundreds, or like in the twos or threes for international units, coming well down below 1. So, that's a real, when I'm working with the general public, that's when we know we're really making progress because people realize, okay, I just need to be able to change a few things and I can make some great progress. The challenge is always knowing which 5 or 10 degrees to go to, right? And people, our natural instinct, and this is back to the shiny toy conversation we had there at the start, is you get pulled in different directions. And so people are kind of walking in 180 degrees, right? They're lost in the forest and they just keep doing the same route over and over again versus if we make the right changes, we can make progress forward and get to where we want to go.
Hmm. You mentioned fast twitch muscle fibers. So
Mhm.
it was a few years ago, it was very difficult to sell to older individuals strength training. Even just the idea was difficult because, well, everybody was after maybe mainly cardio. But now we bring in a new subject, which is basically power, speed. And normally clients were told that they have to bicycle and swim, which is okay, that's great. But nobody told them to get faster or more powerful. So even some scientists are created the name powerpenia, right? Like losing the power,
Mhm.
which is, as you mentioned, it's a very good uh, number for falling, the risk of falling.
Yeah.
So how do you see what are the safe ways to improve power, let's say over 40 or 50?
It's a great question. I think one of the things we can easily forget is that people who are deconditioned or unfit, if you're asking them to do a certain task, they're going to get a lot of recruitment, right? So the muscle fiber types are always firing in that order of most explosive, strength, aerobic, right? There's always a combination versus just one fiber type. And so if we take someone who's very unfit, maybe significantly overweight, like they sit down every day, right? They sit down in their chair and they get back up. Now, when they get back up, they tend to push on the chair and like really need to, they're not just using their legs to get back up. So a very simple way is to just in the back of a chair, and this could be done with an 80-year-old all the way to, if you're very overweight, it's like having a weight vest, right? So a body weight squat, if you're 280 pounds, it's pretty significant squat compared to somebody who's 150 pounds, right? So just doing body weight squats, tapping the backside of the chair and back up, as a way to even assess a general client. Like, was it really hard by the time you got to 8 or 10 or 12 reps? Could you get to 25 or 30 reps? No problem. Um, that's one way of being able to assess where people are at. We know now that even for building muscle, we can work in all the rep ranges, right? It's just
Mhm.
that if we do higher reps, it just takes us longer to get there. But if you're older and you haven't trained as much, it's much safer, right? Like we can work into like a walking lunge. We can use a stick for a static split squat to help use one arm to give you a little bit of support as you build up the ability to do a split
Mhm.
squat. So just up and down, and then turn that into a walking lunge. Then find a hill, which will add load and do the walking lunge up the hill. That's even before we then add load with dumbbells or a weight vest or whatnot. So I think there's lots of different strategies. People who like the gym or love the gym, it's always, let's call it easier in a sense because you can send them there and you can pick your exercises, etc. I think where maybe as coaches we've probably not done a good enough job over the years is helping people who don't like the gym. Like what can they do when they go to the park?
Mhm.
Because you don't need a gym if you don't like the gym. You can train all these qualities at the beach, in the forest, on the in the park, you
Mhm.
know. So how do we help them with is it step ups? A bench is great for press ups because you can do a press up on the floor, you can do a press up on the part of the bench that you sit on, you can do a press up on the back of the bench. So now all of a sudden you're 75 degrees. So you're changing the load just by changing the body position, you know. And then the person can do a loop, walk around the park for 4 or 5 minutes. Maybe they do a walk jog. So I think helping people to build up that progression and also helping, it's probably changed a lot since, and this might have been when you started as well, but I remember when I was in my early 20s, personal training, like we would train people hard and they could barely sit down the next day. And we thought, okay, that was a great session. It's not very smart, right? I mean, you always want to take the low hanging fruit. So if all you need is 1 or 2 sets of a few reps to feel an effect on the muscles, hey, let's take the win. Nicer for the client, right? They feel good. They come out of the session feeling better than when they started, which is the goal, right? If a client is throwing up at the end of a session, I mean, we know now that that's the nervous system's protection mode. I mean, that's very, very bad, even not ideal for athletes. So, yeah, I think there's lots of ways of doing it and just helping people to see some benchmarks. And the last thing I'll say is for those people who, again, who don't like the gym, I think it's connecting it to like connecting the physical qualities you're trying to achieve, whether it's the power that you talked about, aerobic fitness, to something in their life that they enjoy. Like, does this person love to dance? Okay, explain to them how doing this activity is going to help their ability to maintain out there longer, to do the lifts. Like, you've got to try to make it tangible so that they see the sessions as additive to something they love versus just like, I'm going on the treadmill to do aerobic work for 30 minutes and they just don't even get how it's just to burn calories. This is why people don't stick to it, right? There's no real connection to their world and their life. So I think that's a really important one to help people actually stay consistent.
So when let's say you can have only like three questions from a client. What will be the three questions you ask from them when they are new clients? They come in, they want to have a lifestyle change. So is there like anything, like good bookmakers? Like, at the end of the day, you have to have narrowed down sometimes your questions.
Yeah, I mean, I think with everything, it's like being a detective, right? So I just want to get as clear a picture of what their typical day actually looks like,
Mhm.
right? I don't want them, especially when you deal with type A personalities or executives, they always give you the best version of the day, the best eating they've had. Like, I'm not interested in the best. I mean, I appreciate them trying to impress me, but we're not here for that. Like, I
Mhm.
just want to know what your day looks like because we need to actually solve the challenges that you're actually facing or the person's actually facing. So, right. So, the more clearly you can have a picture of the person's day. When do they wake up? What do they eat for breakfast? What time? Do they snack in between? What do they eat for lunch? What's happening in the afternoon? What about dinner? What happens after dinner? What do they do before bed? Right? All these little things. And so in an intake, and I do an hour intake, you get all this information.
Mhm.
And the mistake I made when I was young is we used to just give them these plans and loads of things to do. And they felt great in the short term. They got all these amazing strategies, but nobody could last 8 or 12 weeks because life gets busy.
Mhm.
Everything they haven't created any patterns, right? We talked about with the seatbelt or habits, right? And so now you collect all that information and then you hold it back and you pick the things that you feel like are either easiest to implement or impact the person in the greatest way, and you layer a couple things on.
Mhm.
And what I've noticed over the years, the nice thing about doing that is you actually get a sense when you put everything in at once, you don't know what's doing what really, right?
Mhm.
You have to guess. When you layer things on one or two at a time, you get a really good idea. So, for example, some clients, when all we do is change the breakfast, even after a week, you see tremendous change in things like body weight, right? That tells me something. It tells me a lot about what was going on in the morning. I have other clients who, let's say, are very similar. If we use kind of a similar archetype of individual, you might change their breakfast and the weight doesn't change that much.
Mhm.
Somebody might say that that's a good or a bad thing. No, it's just information. It's telling me, that, again, something about the start of the day, what they were doing, and the pain point is likely somewhere else. And so I think as coaches, again, being able to take the information, reflect on it, and then give back to the client. And it doesn't matter if they're us or an elite athlete, right? Elite athletes struggle to eat the right breakfast. They stay up too late. Like
Mm,
they're different from us in certain genetic aspects and what they can do out there, but they're the same as us in terms of they struggle with a lot of the same human problems we all do, right?
mm,
Um, and so being able to just layer it on is great because people can then repeat it, and then it's just what they do. And at the end, 6 months or a year down the road, if you ask them what they did, they can kind of tell you, but they don't have a list of things that they're trying to accomplish. It's just become how they operate, right? And I think that's where we get a really nice, because I'll have clients, I've had some clients for 15, 20 years, and it's like, you start to see their kids. And so you get a good sense of what people will actually stick with,
mm,
right?
mm,
Over a year, over 5 years. And you start to get a good sense of the messages. So even in the book Peak 40, we talk about master your morning and own your night, right?
mm,
If all people get out of this whole podcast is that the morning's really important, the before bed's really important, what you do in the middle of the day, it's still important, but far less. Like worry about that last.
mm,
Start with your morning because your compliance is the highest, right? Like your ability to make change is the highest. Then go to the evening. It's the toughest, but it has the biggest bang for your buck, right? Because it's impacting sleep and energy, etc. And don't worry so much about the middle of the day, right? Like don't beat yourself up over having this snack or that snack. One of the strategies I use is we take whatever indulgence the person's having late at night, which is typically when we do, and we just stick it in the middle of the afternoon.
mhm,
And they always say, "Well, shouldn't I not be eating that?" I'm like, at this point, it's not a question of whether you should or shouldn't. You shouldn't be eating it at the time that we need at night, right?
mm,
But we'll work on that down the road. And then the last message I always give this category of clients is like, we want you to live a little. We want you to enjoy your life, right? I mean, one of the great things about living in Europe is people, eat well and they're out socializing and, it's amazing. So we don't want to have like a regimented,
mm,
you know, really robotic life. But so if we do well Monday to Friday, we can live a little on the weekends. You can still enjoy things, right? And I think again, that's where people have a level of apprehension, is they always feel like they're going to have to overhaul their entire lives, right? And they can no longer have a piece of cake or half a bottle of wine. It's like, well, it depends for each person, but if we do well Monday to Friday, normally we can, we can still, enjoy things in life.
Thank you for this summary. And as I understand, you have very tight schedule. So we agreed on finishing before
Yes.
before you have to go. And I really, really appreciate your time and your wisdom. So I hope at one point we're gonna meet and we can continue this conversation. But I really appreciate your time.
Peter, listen, I appreciate you having me on. Thanks for yeah, picking up the book. Hopefully those folks in Hungary are going to get some benefit from it as well. And certainly next time I'm in Budapest, we'll have to get together for coffee.
Let's do it. Thank you.
I appreciate the time, Peter.
Thanks. Bye.